Good morning, everybody. For those of you who are not in the morning, but at least in my time zone, it's 12 o'clock right now. So good morning, everybody. I originally streamed this the first time, ran into a few technical difficulties. So those sorry about that. Yeah, so originally I streamed this, ran into some technical difficulties. It didn't work out very well, but here I am. Let's get right into it. As of this day, tomorrow, Monday, October 16th, for the October session is paper one, or the written examination for Global Perspectives in Research 9239. And I thought I should really do a masterclass video on this component. So this is what we're going to talk about today. Really small. We're first going to, talk about what's really being asked in the component, just general layouts, protocols, and then, right after that, I'll tell you what Cambridge expects, what the examiner is going to expect from your paper to really score high. And to show you how to score high, I will actually show you a paper. I've broke it down into 10 to 15 different slides. I will read it. I'm going to annotate and show you what the examiner comments are, and just give you some, wrap up what the overall paper I've shown you, just show you how many marks that candidate scored, some general tips, what he followed, and then, my last minute suggestions, the examples, and I'll be answering your questions after that. So if you want the data set for component one, the syllabus code is 9239, and it's an hour and 30-minute paper where you have three questions basically. Let me get a pointer. So you have three questions basically, and the first one's really straightforward. One of them is 2 marks. The next one is 4 marks. Just comprehensive question. They just ask you directly what's being asked. And section 2 is, or sorry, excuse me, question 2, a 10-mark question asks you regarding the strengths and weaknesses of the first document. And question 3 is the 14 marks question, which asks you to compare and analyze both documents basically. And the total marks is 30 marks, and you have 2 documents, or 2 comprehensions, or 2 essays, 2 texts, whatever. And these 3 questions, so you got to solve that in an hour and 30 minutes. So what are the Cambridge expectations exactly? The first thing is you need to analyze and understand the author's argument and tone. Now, what I mean by this, they don't expect you to open the examination booklet and see the 2 topics, read passively, and just write your answers, because that's a guarantee pass that you won't really score basically. They expect you to actually sit in the shoes of the author and sit in the audience poll and actually ask yourself, what is the author's intent? What is the argument and tone? I will actually get more deep about this when we talk about the passages, the example candidate responses. So we'll get into that. The next thing is to evaluate the arguments and see to what extent they're convincing. So now that you read it, you read the passage, you read the documents, and now you're looking at the questions, you have to really speculate the arguments. You got to see, okay, the author's intent is X, Y, and Z. And what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to contradict that? Am I supposed to reiterate that? Am I supposed to rationalize that? I mean, again, at the end of the day, it really matters on what the question is. But essentially, you should be able to be on this critical stage of evaluating the arguments and see how far they're convincing. Convincing, persuading, Cambridge really loves to use these words in global perspectives. So I guess the best way to really see if it's convincing is just ask yourself, were you convinced with the author's arguments? Like, for example, if the document was about smoking and the author was talking how smoking is good for health, for example, you're going to ask yourself, well, did the author convince me that smoking is good for health. And that leads to my third point is now from there, you have to judge the strengths of the arguments by certain components. So for example, if you think that yes, he did convince me, the next point is to judge. So how? Like prove it, prove that he actually did convince you. And for there, you have a certain, certain traits that you'd want to see in a passage. So for instance, I'd want to see statistics. I'd want to see authoritative responses. For example, maybe I have somebody talking from the University of Cambridge about smoking, or somebody from the New York Research Center actually presents data that smoking is good for health. I want to see that stuff in the passage to prove that the argument is more concrete. Next is you got to interrogate the evidence and compare perspectives. I directly took this from the syllabus copy. I actually directly took this for one. There's no way to actually rephrase this. And second, when you really think about it, I think Cambridge really looks for this. They want to actually see that the candidate is questioning the source. For example, if I was the author of document 1 and I use, let's say my source is a teacher, but the source being a teacher is out of context, then essentially I got to ask myself, that source isn't strong. So overall, my strength of the argument is really poor. And so, but after that, you got to have to compare the perspectives, basically saying that, all right, well, one perspective was the social perspective. And the next perspective was the health perspective. Was the health perspective more comparing to the social perspective? You got to ask yourself these questions while you're actually, reading the passage or annotating the passage. And understanding the strengths and weaknesses of documents and have the ability to come to concrete solutions. Absolutely, this is, I cannot stress this more enough, because if you cannot come to a stage where you see the strengths and weaknesses of documents by seeing the traits that you need to see, you're gonna run into a problem, A, and B, your answer is gonna be really vague. It's not gonna come to, it's not gonna be really apt, basically. And overall, you need to have the ability to evaluate, reflect, and also have communicate really well, put your point across, and make that really strong. Because communication matters. I can have amazing content, but if I can't communicate that well, then we're in a problem. So let's put that in mind. What I'm going to do is I'm going to break down the sample paper. This was question paper 12, May-June 2017. I believe my teacher gave this to me. In fact, the response I'm about to show you was somebody from her class. So she got this, I believe, from the teacher's support. You can ask your teacher, and you can probably get this paper. I'm just going to show you the questions. I will actually, brief out what the topic was, and so you guys won't just be really confused. So the topic, document 1, basically in short, was talking about plain packaging and public health. If I will in fact directly read what it says over here. Document 1 is adapted from Smoking, Plain Packaging and Public Health, an online article written by Julian Morris in 2014. The author is a vice president of research at Reason Foundation, a US-based think tank which works towards a society based on liberty and individual choice. I just actually directly read that off the paper, but to really summarize this in a sentence or two, the document was just, going on saying how plain packaging was like a brilliant idea, but it turned out that it didn't really work. He's, that's basically it. Document 2 was a contradiction. If I read the summary directly, it says, document 2 adapted from why plain packaging is reducing the number of smokers in Australia. An article written by Professor David Currow in 2014 in the Sydney Morning Herald. The author is a chief executive officer of the Cancer Institute, New South Orleans, Wales, Australia. So this document was merely contradiction, saying how it actually worked, and he goes on hammering any counter arguments, basically. So let's put this aside. Let's read question 1. Question 1 was document 1 asks you to study and identify 2 negative aspects or effects of smoking as given by the author in document 1. 2 marks, and B, identify and explain 2 different approaches to reducing smoking given by the author. 4 marks. Question 2 is document 1. Now keep this in mind. Question 1 and 2 is almost always, at least based on my knowledge from the past papers, they're always on document 1 and document 1 of question 1 and 2. Document 3 is where they bring in question 2, which makes it kind of hard, but with practice it really comes in. I'll get to this point in a second, but document 1 and document 1 come in both question 1 and 2, so that's something you really want to look at. So that's question 2, which says, how convincing is the evidence in document 1 that plain packaging of cigarettes is counterproductive? In your answer, you should evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of the evidence. We'll see this answer too. And number 3, study documents 1 and 2. Both authors discuss the effects of plain packaging of cigarettes upon smoking. To what extent does the author's argument in document 2 challenge that of the author in document 1? So let's see the responses. I actually had to take these responses of the answer sheets. I actually had to request permission for these. So I really excused for any kind of scanning problems. They were A3 paper and it was really hard to scan. So there were some parts where, the text was cut off. I did type in the text above, but I'll be reading through this, and I chose to taking this because it's raw and you can actually see how the teacher or the examiner actually corrects this. So question A, which asked about 2 negative effects of smoking. Over here, you can say, I've just read the answer, the 2 negative effects the author states are the reduction of quality of life through smoking, decreases, and is a major cause of death. Yeah, no, so number 1, you can see, well, this guy didn't make sense. And yeah, it's kind of true, but if you put the grammar aside for a second, you can see here that reduction of quality of life is underlined, and major cause of death is underlined too. Well, if you have seen the passage, this is actually, the first line. It's really stated. He actually says negative effects of smoking are you reduce the quality of life and you are a really high chance of dying, basically. So what I think the student has done amazing here was the fact that he underlined the answer. So you can see the examiner just checked it through. Maybe because she was a teacher, she just had to do this correction, but maybe the examiner does, maybe he doesn't, I don't know, but he's going to definitely see these. So as far as you can, please make sense. Do not use incorrect grammar, which leads to just check your answer right after that. So he gets 2 marks over here, and question the B part was identify and explain the 2 different approaches to reducing smoking given by the author in document 1. So this is how it is. You can approach this question in 2 ways. Number 1, I can just write like 7 to 8 sentences regarding this, where 1 sentence is the statement, the second sentence is the explanation, first sentence statement, explanation, you can go on. But what I really liked about what the candidate did over here was how he broke this down into bullet points. For number 1, the examiner is going to read tons of papers. He cannot, okay, maybe he can, but it's going to be a really hard time for him to just read through this dense writing. And this candidate had, it was legible, but could have done better in his handwriting. But the other thing is that some people write small, some people write big. So you make his life easier by writing bullet points when you can, and underlining it, it's just going to be easier for him. So yeah, so if we just read the answer, the author mentions that wealthy governments banned cigarettes, or banned smoking, excuse me, related advertisements. By this, he gives examples of banning related ads in sport events and magazines. Number 1, done out of the way. Number 2, in addition, he states the usage of quote-unquote plain packaging and connects Australia as a case study. They believe that decreasing the brand of cigarettes will decrease the sale of cigarettes. So over here, he gives the statement, plain packaging, and the candidate actually explains this and says, this is how he uses it, this is the effect, uses this as a case study, banned smoking articles, gives the examples. So it was basically, what you really need to do generally, not only for these questions, is always show proof. Think of this as a court case. If I'm going to criticize somebody, I got to have proof for criticizing that person. You can't just pull numbers, pull statements out of thin air. That's not going to work, both in a court and in a paper like this. You got to really say, okay, he says this, and over here he says that by giving examples of blah blah blah. Or over here he states this by giving statistics and uses this as a case study. So that's how you're really supposed to approach that. And you can see that more dense when we come to question 2. Question 2 is a really big response. I actually divided this into like 3 slides. So I will read and I will interrupt and tell you where the good stuff are, the bad stuff are. So the question was to analyze the strengths and weaknesses of document 1. The author of document 1, Julian Moore, does his best to present the overview of the aftermath regarding plain packaging. His document is structured in a way where he gave us an epitome of Australia, a valid and worthy case study, adapting and following the idea of plain packaging. Quote unquote, he uses this as an evidence. Let's stop here for a second. You can see over here is the candidate did not directly come into the answer. He did not come into the point. He did not directly start explaining. He let his plane take off properly. And I think that's what you're really supposed to do. Do not be abrupt and start. I think what you really need to do is do like an introduction. Say the author does this. Now, let me say this now. There is no right or wrong answer for question 2 or 3. It's because it really depends on how the reader looks at it. Like I can look at document 1 in one way, and you may not. So it's really a good idea to really present this, because for an examiner, you'll know where his stance are, and it also leads to a good writing technique. You want to give your idea, you want to give your stance at the beginning, like make it a punch. Like okay, like the reader should be like, all right, this guy knows that document 1 was good because of XYZ, and then you go on explaining. So that's what he did over here. He said he says us. But he didn't even praise that. I think that was probably what you do in document, the question 3, sorry. Over here, he just said that this is what document 1 did by just, giving Australia as an example and providing the idea of plain packaging. So let's read on. By giving an example, the argument became more concrete. However, a major flaw here is the lack of citing sources. This is referring, that got cut off, referring to Australia. This would have made his argument much more authentic and the case study much more stronger. So what you can see here is he gave a strength, valid case study, but lack of cites. So that's I think what your ideal structure is supposed to be. You're supposed to make it like it's supposed to be an amazing structure where you're supposed to do strength, weakness, strength, weakness, strength, weaknesses. Don't cite all your strengths and don't cite all your weaknesses, because what's going to happen is you're going to really fall into a problem with the examiner. He's going to lose you. And also you can tend to be biased. Maybe you can, but you have to make your scale much more balanced. So by just presenting this, you're showing yourself, like putting your hands up and saying, hey, I'm unbiased. I'm presenting the strengths and weaknesses. And in the end, which we'll see in a second, we'll see if the candidate actually fell to a place. So let's see the second one. Okay, you can also see here is he didn't put the bullet points, but he took one strength and weakness and divided this into a paragraph. Strength and weaknesses, this became one paragraph, and he started a new paragraph here with another strength and weakness. So as the case study of Australia unfolds, Morris uses timestamps. Over here, he actually uses a reference in 2012, ... years of which major events took place. To lay out to the reader, the situation is in a chronological order. This information given here was splendid and very comprehensive, but it would have strengthened his timestamps if he could have added authoritative statements or just quotes during interviews for anyone at the Australian legislation. So you may say that he euphemized this. You may say that he just connected this together. I'm going to say he connected this together really well. He used really, I think that's like 3 sentences. I'm not counting, but it's probably roughly 3 sentences. He got 2 points out of the way, and the examiner is going to see that, just going to check it, boom. He uses timestamps, but does not use authoritative statements. He sees these stuff, you're gonna get those checkpoints. So over here, okay, so during interviews for anyone during the Australian legislation, all right, so over here, it turns out that the one more line got cut off, and apparently I didn't type it. I apologize for that. But over here, the paper says, just as it lacks authoritative statements, it also flaws, let's read from the screen, in providing evidence when implicitly stating there is evidence. So I don't know if you understood that, but basically what the candidate is saying, that he says there is evidence, but he doesn't put it there. And he in fact gives an example. Evidence is that restriction ... could have been heightened if there was a citation of any sort regarding the counterattack of plain packaging. Again, stating, quote unquote, it had a little influence on the decline in smoking isn't enough. Had the author of the document referred to research, for example, his main idea wouldn't be weak. So the candidate actually gives a suggestion, which is something you should really look for. You're gonna strength, weaknesses, and probably boost them up. Just give it a turbo. Like maybe if you'd done this, it would have really helped. So that's a good idea. You probably want to do this, but bear in mind, don't do that all the time. It's gonna sound really robust. It's gonna sound annoying. You don't really want that to happen. If you just do it really, occasionally here and there, you want to cover words up and you think that it's really a good idea, go for it. Anyway, where were we? Smoking had the author, yes. However, the author in the same paragraph clearly speculates the event and concisely, yeah, he spelled it wrong, and concisely shows analysis by stating the online survey of smokers and theorizing his points of results of the survey. So, first of all, don't do this many scratches. That's not a good idea. I mean, maybe a lot of students do it, but be neat. It really helps. The next thing is evidence stated. Oh, you can see the examiner here says evidence stated and arguments reasoned. So I can actually definitely agree to that, and probably you should. The author, the examiner does see that the person has clearly reasoned, put our arguments reasoned, and evidence stated. He actually, puts these. He directly just, states them in the passage. So moving on. Oh wait, oops, did I read the sentence below? By stating, yes, the paragraph gives concluding sentence, okay, showing where the results landed, quote, this is blocking the way, okay, he just gives a quote here, of smokers in Australia has not declined. As the author closes his document, he does a brilliant job in referring to higher authorities such as the Australia Customs and Border Protection Service. By giving this example, the author emphasizes on the fact that even people of customs and border security confirm that plain packaging has affected Australia as a whole. In addition, extra stress has been made to this fact by adding statistical data to the point with timestamps 7.5% of cigarette sales, ... 18 months, ... It would have been much more conceiving if more references have been made throughout the document. If more, more references would definitely place document 1 to a whole new level of factual evidence of the real problem. The examiner here says that's actually cut off. I think that says justified. Let me just confirm. Sustained argument and evaluation. So yes, he goes on. He didn't drop you down. He gave you strength, weakness. He provided the evidence. So you're good to go there. And next, okay, yeah, over here. Lastly, the conclusion of the document was crisp for the reader and did sum the complete document. He quotes here as plain packaging continues. A flaw here is the ambiguity. So over here, he says a flaw here is ambiguity. The document mentions the document mentions that it concludes and not only bringing that it in the thesis shows how the minimization shifted fast. Yeah, so that kind of doesn't make sense, but let's continue. To sum up, this is the conclusion. To sum up, document 1 did its best to convey the problem of plain packaging, although it did have loose ends that should have been heeded before. So he got 8 points over here. So basically, to really state this off, the first thing is, if you had him in counting, he presented this as a 10-point question. So he actually got 5 paragraphs through, so 2 of each. The next thing over here is the judgment. Now, judgment is really important. If you're going to build up this argument, you're boasting document one, you're boasting its strengths, you're criticizing its weaknesses, and you just leave that cliffhanger, let your reader fall from the sky, you're going to lose a lot of points on the judgment because you didn't land onto this. With that being said, that doesn't mean that you should you should say something. You should, but then don't make it really vague at the same time. You can say something like this. I believe the candidate here just didn't know whether he should say it's strong, but it's not weak. So saying something like this always works, because you're just restating your thesis, which is strengths were nice, but it had problems. So this always works. If you think that there are more strengths than weaknesses, you can definitely say that here. But again, that just depends on the document. So let's go to the third question, which was how far was document 2 convincing than document 1? So he starts off saying document 2's document regarding the positive of plain packaging is far more than and convincing than document 1. I can't, again, this is directly from a candidate, so I can't really say anything, but do bear in mind that you don't make these mistakes. This is really important because you need to make sense, but occasionally I guess the examiner would understand. Just at least make it legible. So anyway, okay, you can also see he puts a bullet point here. So he actually breaks down this 14-mark question into bullet points, which I think is really neat. I think that's really nice. He puts these in paragraphs, but then makes it bullet points. So it's spaced out. It doesn't look like one big page of work. Make it neat. So this is a really good idea. First of all, documents 2's claim and main idea is stated bold and clear right at the beginning. We understand that he is bolstering the significant decrease, and there is proof for it. Evidence. This lets us, the reader, know. This lets us, the reader. I think it's supposed to be readers. This lets us, the reader, know the stance. The author wishes to stand on and decreases the ambiguity right at the beginning. Really firm, comes right to the point, and says why document 2 is amazing. And over here, counter argument. This is not the case of document 1, where it takes time to introduce its main argument. In fact, discussing the counterclaim took more time than it's supposed to. This weakens the document at the start. So this is, I think, more of a layout sense. I think if you have done the individual essay, or if you're new to this, you'll learn how structuring and organization is important, not only in global perspectives, but as a whole. And by using this is actually a good idea. Always, if you can't find anything wrong with citations and sources and evidence, you will. But then if you need more, look at the layout. Is their document really strong at the start? Is it weak? So this is stuff you'd probably want to see. Next, document 2, David Kuro mentions and cites research centers adding a lot of weight where his data becomes authentic. Reference. This takes the data to a whole new field of speculation. Document 1, however, has limited itself to citing research centers in the first place. Not only will it make the data and analysis bland, but also questions originality. This is what I mean by what I said in the beginning of interrogating evidence. You need to interrogate evidence. You need to actually say whether the source is strong. And if the author has done that here, right, then you're good, basically. So let's see what the examiner said here. Strength, careness, counter argument, well done, evidence cited, communication effective. So again, this is from the marking scheme. You can clearly see that she even puts the checkpoints here, so that's good. Continuing, David Kuro doesn't only sit in the shoes, in the perspective of health, but also broadens the picturing. I'm pretty sure the picture by even bringing monetary data figures. This economic picture presents data in a raw fashion, and this further corresponds to the main argument. Document 1's nature, being narrow-minded of health, doesn't show any cause and effect relationship. The argument, in other words, will lack structure because it looked at one theme and one perspective. So I guess, if you didn't really understand, just to reiterate, this actually had more, it was more broad-minded, it was more open rather than document 1 just looking only at health, which makes it kind of weak. If you just think about it like this, If I read an essay, an argumentative essay that says, discuss how far should nuclear energy uh, be extended to meet energy needs, just for example. If I'm only going to talk about science, I'm only going to say, well, nuclear energy is this, their chemicals is this, they're so efficient. 1 kilogram of uranium can give like a so and so joules of energy, and that's your whole essay. But then you have another essay that says that talks about the chemical aspects, that talks about the monetary aspects, that talk about the social aspects, that talks about case studies. I think the answer is obvious of who's going to actually be stronger, and that's what document 2 did, and that's what the candidate actually questioned. So see if you can do something like this. See that did they use many perspectives? Did they use a single perspective? So you want to see stuff like that. Next, document 2 bravely attacks the claim of document 1. To heighten this, he says cigarette sales increased by 59 million. He takes this and questions the originality as the data is yet to be published. However, in document 1, it's in document 1. So in document 1, the author hasn't attacked or even questioned the counterclaim, which questions the manifestation of Morris. So by now you can see that the candidate is using a lot of fancy words: manifestation, bolstering, heightening, rationalizing, theorizing. So you want to use verbs that, or I think synonyms at least, of words like stress, communication, effective. See if you can use synonyms like this. It's really boring if I read document 1 stresses, document 2 stresses, document 3 emphasizes, stresses, emphasizes. It's use different words. It really, you're putting out the same meaning, and it shows variety and increases communication points. So it's definitely worth it, but try to use it in the right context. It's going to be kind of bad if you don't use it in good context. So continuing, the data presented in document 2 is raw. For instance, Kuro says, evidence there, 536 smokers. This means that there is much more primary research going. This also means that there is a pressure group that has evidence to prove plain packaging works. Document 1 has no primary data, and this weakens the epitome, the fault in the Australia case study. So I guess this is kind of straightforward. Questioning if the data was primary or secondary. The candidate here is a business student, so he kind of knew where this was going. So you probably do, if you probably want to do some research of questioning the sources. That's something you really want to look into, because that's mainly what you want to do in this question. Question the accuracy, question the originality of documents. So it's probably worth looking into, seeing data, aspects of evidence, something you really want to look into. Document 2 is very pragmatic. He isn't stating numbers, but he is showing how practical it can be by saying it's difficult quitting, and educated people are doing so. Document 2 is not pragmatic and just went facts after facts. He doesn't come to an area of conclusion to where our problem can lead to. So this is kind of nice. I kind of find this really entertaining, because I think the candidate actually steps out and looks at the author as well, and that's all right. But you gotta state that. Don't just say the author. If you're gonna say the author, you gotta say evidence, and then it works. You're actually saying the author is pragmatic. That's actually good evidence to show who's strong and who's weak. So something you can probably try. Lastly, the evidence provided in document 2 is sandwiched throughout the passage while citing sources and neatly speculating the data. The structure, in addition, just allows us readers to be convinced that plain packaging, quote unquote, works. The limitation of evidence is document 1 brought down to Julian Morris to an understanding of a hypothesis rather than a document. This is a weird sentence, but that leads to my thing. Check your work right after you read it. I cannot stress this more enough, because you may have content, but they're going to read the document really quickly. Your answers really quickly. So make it sensible. All in all, document 2 is stronger because of its originality, evidence, and practicality of data, while document 2 failed to satisfy most of the traits or limits itself to do so. So yeah, the candidate here ended up scoring a 26. Over here, I actually, if you can see the points, a 12 over here. I think it's probably because of the grammar, because over here he actually says that, you know, the strength is nice. Probably it's the sentence functions, I believe. And 8 points over here because I believe, again, it's the sentence problems and, you know, the scratching. Again, this was a mock paper, so it's possible to get full points, but, you know, it's going to be hard. You're going to have to be really concrete. You'll have to make sense every time. You can't make any kind of mistakes. So yeah, so the candidate ended up scoring a 26 out of 30. And basically some tips, you know, just like the candidate, like I said, you want to underline phrases that you think are really important. So the examiner will just be like running down your thing. So if you underline what's right and that happens to be the marking scheme, you just get a point, and that's how you want to go. Use effective transition words. Definitely do not make it choppy. You want to make it really smooth, make it like in a flow. So I give examples, however, in addition, stuff like that. Uh, these are really important because, you know, you'll be flowing between points, like I said, and, you know, that will give your reader can move with you. Number 3, don't write really a single really big paragraph. What I mean by this is, this may sound really weird, but what I mean by this is there are examiners. In fact, I used to do this myself, where there would just be a student who just say question 2, and his exam sheet has no spaces, no indentation, no gaps. It's just end to end. It's just a really big response. Okay, well, this is what's going to happen. Number 1, you're going to scare your examiner because that's a lot to read. Number 2, you're going to push him off because it's going to be really bland. And number 3, it's going to be hard to follow. If you break it down into paragraphs, to bullet points and stuff, it's going to be really good. It's going to be smooth, and your examiner is going to be on the same page as you. And use professional words. Don't write slang, and don't be casual. Like, for example, this is a really good example I like to use. If you're going to say, let's say, Sherlock Holmes wanted to get this case over with. That's decent. Don't say, you know, Sherlock Holmes wanted to blow the lid off this sketchy thing. That's you know, that's creative. I appreciate it, but that's not formal. That's in fact, you're actually going to lose a lot of points if you're going to be really casual. Like, if you see the responses, sit in the shoes, that's okay. Like, you know, you just made the benchmark. You probably want to say, you know, like something like, you know, just trying to get something out of my mind. If you want to say like sitting in the shoes, that's a good phrase. That's good enough. But if you say like, you know, if you were the author, so use phrases for you were the author. Like, for example, document 1, the author wanted to be the reader, or wanted to be the audience, or sit in shoot. You know, that's the only phrase I'm getting. You know what? You can use that phrase, but rephrase that. That's important. So I left this page for questions that I want to answer. So if there is any questions right now, I'm going to stop the screen share. If there's any questions right now, please put them right now in the comments. That will be really helpful. Are there any questions? Let me just go up to my YouTube stream. If there are any questions, please put that up so I can really answer them right now. If not, we do have a ZNotes community. We just crossed 1,000 members right now, where, you know, there's a team of professors, a bunch of students probably doing the same exams as you. You want to check that out, where you can definitely ask your questions anytime. I did this for Competent 1 because number 1, a lot of people have been asking for it, and number 2, the exam is tomorrow, so I really wanted to help everybody out. So that's what I tended to do. If you have any questions, if you want to post it right now, that would be great. If you can't, like, you know, for any kind of reason, or you're watching this recorded and you're not on the live right now, you can always come to the ZNotes community, where we'll be answering questions constantly, despite the fact that we're on different time zones. It still works. So be sure to check that out. And And be sure to subscribe also, because if you do really like these live streams, or acing, the acing series, that's a name I just got, the acing series, talking about specific competence, let us know in the feedback channels of the Z coaches, or the Z class, or the ZNotes community. We'll surely try to see if we can do stuff like this. If you want a specific video, you can tell us right now, or you can just tell us later. Anything works. So that's that. I'm just gonna go see if there's anybody that has any questions. And if there are no questions right now, I will call it. I will sign off. And yeah, so let's just see if there are any questions. All right. So loading. And in the meantime, let's see if we have anything else we have to do. All right. So apparently there are no questions as of now. So I really hope. I really hope there are. I hope you guys understood. I hope this really made sense. Uh, that I wish. I mean, if there's anything else, if you do really like the series of, you do like the series, do let us know. We'll see if we can make more series like this. I personally had fun with this. So again, anything else regarding global perspectives or any other subject, do let us know in the feedback channels of Z Coach and the Z class, the Z Notes community, excuse me. And we'll surely look into it. I hope you really got a lot out of this presentation. Thank you so much, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.